Pack your things. Your sister needs the space, Dad ordered, standing in my doorway with that familiar look of disappointment. Emma's starting her online business and she needs a proper office. You have until Friday. I sat at my desk, staring at my laptop screen, where my bank's confirmation email glowed back at me. If only they knew that 20 minutes ago, I'd won the foreclosure auction for our family home. The very home they were trying to kick me out of. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and at 26, I just became my parents' landlord. Did you hear me? Dad's voice grew sharper. This isn't up for discussion. I heard you, I replied calmly, closing my laptop. I'll start packing tomorrow. He nodded curtly and left, probably relieved I hadn't argued. That's what they expected from me, quiet compliance. For years, I'd been the dependable daughter, the one who never caused trouble, who helped with bills when money got tight, who stayed home during college to save money while Emma went to an expensive private university in California. Emma, my 23-year-old sister, bounced into my room moments later, her perfectly styled blonde hair swinging. I'm thinking of painting these walls sage green, she announced, not even trying to hide her excitement. It'll be perfect for my wellness coaching videos. I looked around at my room, the room I'd had since I was 6, with its soft blue walls and window seat where I'd spent countless hours reading. The room where I'd built my own business, quietly investing in real estate while everyone thought I was just a low-level accountant. Sage green sounds nice, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Emma had no idea that I'd been tracking our parents' finances for months, watching as they remortgaged the house to fund her failed startup attempts. She didn't know about the foreclosure notice I found in Dad's office 3 weeks ago, or the careful planning that had gone into my purchase of our home. I know you're probably upset, Emma said, though her tone suggested she didn't really care. But Mom and Dad agree I need the space for my business. You can find an apartment or something, right? You're good with, like, budgets and stuff. I almost laughed. Good with budgets was an understatement. While Emma had burned through our parents' savings with 3 failed business ventures, the yoga studio, the organic smoothie bar, and a lifestyle blog, I'd been building a real estate portfolio that now included 12 rental properties across the city. This house would be lucky number 13. Don't worry about me, I said. I'll figure something out. Later that evening, I sat at the kitchen table with Mom and Dad, picking at the lasagna Mom had made, my favorite, probably an attempt to soften the blow of kicking me out. We know this is sudden, Mom said, her voice gentle but firm. But Emma really needs this opportunity. Her wellness coaching business could be her big break. Like the yoga studio was her big break. I couldn't help asking. Or the smoothie bar. That's not fair, Dad cut in. Your sister is trying to build something. She has vision, creativity. She just needs the right support. And what about my support? I asked quietly. The money I gave you for the mortgage last year? The repairs I paid for? Mom at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. We appreciate everything you've done, honey. But Emma has such potential. She just needs a proper space though. To what? Fail again. The words slipped out before I could stop them. That's enough, Dad snapped. If you can't be supportive of your sister, maybe it is time you moved out. Emma understands business in a way you never will. All you do is work that boring accounting job and hide in your room. I stood up, taking my plate to the sink. Let them think that. Let them believe I was just the boring, reliable daughter. In 3 days, they'd learn exactly what kind of business sense I had. The next morning, I watched from my window as Emma directed Dad in hanging a new vision board in what would soon be her office. She'd already started moving some of her things in. Expensive camera equipment and ring lights she'd bought with our parents' credit card, yoga mats and crystals from her previous failed ventures. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Charlotte, paperwork is being processed. We can serve the new lease agreements on Friday. Perfect timing, I texted back. They just gave me until Friday to move out. Charlotte's response was quick. They're in for quite a surprise. Want me to be there when they find out? I considered it. Charlotte had been my rock through this whole process, helping me navigate the foreclosure purchase legally and ethically. She'd also been the one to help me document every penny I'd given my parents over the years. Money they'd promptly handed to Emma for her latest schemes. Yes, I replied. Come by around 6. That's when Dad usually gets home. I spent the next 2 days quietly packing, letting my family believe I was preparing to leave. Emma took over more and more of my space, talking endlessly about her plans for her wellness empire. Mom and Dad hovered awkwardly, obviously feeling guilty but convinced they were doing the right thing for their younger daughter. None of them noticed that I was only packing personal items. None of them questioned why I seemed so calm about being suddenly homeless. They were too caught up in Emma's excitement, in her big plans and bigger promises. Thursday night, I overheard them in the kitchen. "Sarah seems to be taking it well," Mom said. "She understands it's for the best," Dad replied. "Besides, it's time she got out on her own. Maybe this will motivate her to do something more with her life than just accounting." "Did she say where she's going?" Emma asked. "No, but she'll figure it out. Sarah always lands on her feet." They had no idea how right they were. Friday morning, I woke up early and dressed carefully in my best business suit, the one my family had never seen because I kept it at the office. I styled my usually practical brown hair, applied makeup, and put on the pearl necklace my grandmother had left me. Today, I wasn't just Sarah, the reliable daughter. I was Sarah Mitchell, property owner and businesswoman. I left for work as usual, but instead of going to the accounting firm where they thought I still worked, I'd actually quit months ago to run my real estate business full-time. I met with Charlotte to review the final paperwork. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, not for the first time. "We could serve the papers by mail. You don't have to be there." "Yes, I do," I said firmly. "They need to understand that actions have consequences. They can't keep enabling Emma at everyone else's expense." Charlotte nodded, understanding in her eyes. She'd seen this story before. Parents playing favorites, responsible children taken for granted, money and love tangled up in messy ways. "The lease terms are fair," she reminded me. "More than fair, actually. You're offering them below market rent and generous terms. They'd be foolish not to take it." "They're not always wise when it comes to money," I said dryly, hence the foreclosure. At 5:45 p.m., I pulled into my driveway. Mom's car was there, along with Emma's expensive SUV, another gift from our parents. But Dad wasn't home yet. Perfect. I walked in to find Emma directing two muscular men as they moved my bed out of my room. She'd already painted one wall sage green. "Oh good, you're back," she said, not even looking guilty. "I hope you don't mind, but since you're leaving tomorrow anyway, I thought I'd get started. These guys from my gym offered to help move your stuff to the garage." "Actually," I said, my voice clear and firm, "I need everyone to stop what they're doing. Now." Something in my tone made them pause. Even Emma looked up from her phone. "What's going on?" Mom asked, coming up the stairs. "I think we should wait for Dad," I said. "Charlotte will be here any minute, and we all need to talk." "Charlotte?" Emma frowned. "Who's Charlotte?" Right on cue, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Charlotte looking polished and professional in her suit, briefcase in hand. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said to my mother. "I'm Charlotte Way, Sarah's attorney. Is Mr. Mitchell home yet? We have some important documents to discuss." Mom's face went pale. "Attorney? Sarah, what is this about?" "Like I said," I replied calmly, "we should wait for Dad." The next 10 minutes were tense. Emma's gym friends quickly made excuses and left. Mom sat rigid on the couch, while Emma paced nervously, shooting me confused looks. Charlotte and I sat calmly, waiting. When Dad's car pulled in, I took a deep breath. This was it. "What's going on?" he demanded as he walked in, taking in the scene. "Who's this?" "Mr. Mitchell." Charlotte stood, extending her hand. "I'm Charlotte Way, your daughter's attorney. I'm here to present you with some important documentation regarding your living situation." "Living situation?" Dad looked at Mom, then at me. "What is she talking about?" I stood up, pulling an envelope from Charlotte's briefcase. 3 weeks ago, I found the foreclosure notice in your office. The one you didn't tell us about. The one that explained how you'd remortgaged this house to the point of no return, trying to fund Emma's businesses. Dad's face went red. "That's none of your. It is my business." I cut him off. "Because this morning, the sale was finalized. I bought this house at the foreclosure auction." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma stopped pacing. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad just stared at me, his face going from red to white. "That's not possible," he finally sputtered. "You're an accountant. You couldn't afford." "I haven't been just an accountant for 2 years," I said. I own 12 other properties across the city. Real estate investment is my actual business. The accounting job was just a cover while I built my portfolio. This is a joke, Emma said, but her voice wavered. Tell her this is ridiculous, Dad. Charlotte pulled out more papers. I assure you this is very real. I have here the new deed showing Sarah Mitchell as the legal owner of 1242 Maple Street. I also have prepared lease agreements should you wish to continue residing in the property. Mom started crying. Dad looked like he might pass out. Emma just kept shaking her head. You can't do this, she whispered. This is our home. No, I said firmly. This was our home. Now it's my property, and you all have a choice to make. You can sign a legal lease agreement with fair market terms, or you can find somewhere else to live. Either way, I'll be moving back into my room on Monday. The transformation in my father was something to behold. Gone was the authoritative man who'd ordered me out of my room just days ago. In his place sat someone who looked lost, defeated. All this time, he said quietly, well, we thought you were just the reliable daughter, the boring accountant, the one who didn't understand business. I smiled, but there was no joy in it. Maybe it's time you all realize that success doesn't always look like Instagram followers and sage green accent walls. Charlotte began laying out the lease documents, explaining the terms and conditions. I watched my family's faces as reality sank in. Everything had changed. The power dynamic, their assumptions about me, their plans for my room. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about respect, about consequences, about finally being seen for who I really was. As I sat there, watching them struggle to process this new reality, I felt strangely calm. For the first time in my life, I was finally calling the shots in my own home. The weekend after I revealed my ownership of the house was tense, to say the least. Emma locked herself in what was still technically my room, refusing to move her things out. Mom alternated between crying and trying to negotiate as a family, while Dad had barely said a word since Charlotte left. I stayed in a hotel, giving them space to process and decide whether they would sign the lease. Charlotte had advised against remaining in the house until everything was legally settled. They're in shock, she said during our Sunday brunch meeting. Your father's pride is wounded, and your sister's whole plan just collapsed. Give them time to accept the new reality. I nodded, stirring my coffee. Emma's been posting on social media about toxic family members and betrayal. She's trying to spin the narrative her way. Are you surprised? Charlotte raised an eyebrow. No, I admitted. It's what she always does when things don't go her way. But this time, she can't charm or manipulate her way out of it. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Please come home. We need to talk. Charlotte saw the message and gave me a knowing look. Remember, you're the property owner now. Don't let them guilt you back into old patterns. I arrived at the house, my house, that afternoon to find the family gathered in the living room. Emma sat curled in an armchair, eyes red from crying. Dad occupied his usual spot on the couch, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Mom stood by the window, wringing her hands. We've been talking, Mom began, her voice trembling slightly, about everything. And I kept my voice neutral, professional. You blindsided us. Dad spoke up, his tone bitter. All this time pretending to be just an accountant while secretly... What? Plotting against us. Plotting? I couldn't help but laugh. I was building a business, Dad. Something you always encourage Emma to do. The only difference is I actually succeeded. By going behind our backs, Emma burst out. By stealing our house. I didn't steal anything, I replied calmly. I purchased this house legally when you all ran it into foreclosure. The same house, by the way, that I helped pay the mortgage on. Money that went to fund your failed businesses instead of actually saving the property. Emma flinched. Mom made a small distressed sound. We've looked over the lease terms, Dad said finally. They're fair. More than fair, actually. Of course they are, I said. I'm not trying to punish anyone. I'm just establishing clear boundaries and expectations. But my business, Emma started. Your business plans aren't my concern, I cut in. If you all choose to sign the lease, you'll be treated like any other tenants. That means paying rent on time, maintaining the property appropriately, and following the terms we agree to. And if we don't sign, Dad asked, then you have 30 days to find new accommodations. The choice is yours. Mom stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Sarah, honey, can't we just talk about this? As a family? We are talking, I said. But this isn't a family discussion, Mom. This is a business transaction. You all made sure of that when you decided to kick me out of my own room without a second thought. The silence that followed was heavy with realization. For the first time, they were seeing the consequences of their actions, of their years of taking me for granted while prioritizing Emma's whims. I'll sign, Dad said finally, his voice rough. We don't have much choice, do we? There's always a choice, I replied, just like you chose to remortgage the house for Emma's projects instead of telling her no, like you chose to kick me out without warning or consideration. Emma stood up suddenly. This isn't fair. I had plans for that room. My wellness coaching will have to happen somewhere else, I finished firmly. If you sign a lease, you keep your current room. I'll be moving back into mine on Monday. But all the work I've already done, the painting, will need to be returned to its original condition, I said, as specified in the lease agreement. Mom tried one last time. Sarah, please, we're still your family. I looked at her thoughtfully. Yes, you are. And maybe that's why this needed to happen. Family doesn't mean enabling bad decisions or taking advantage of each other. It means honesty, respect, and accountability. Dad picked up the lease agreement from the coffee table, staring at it like it might bite him. You've really thought this through, haven't you? I learned from the best, I said, meeting his eyes. You always taught Emma about business opportunities, about seizing the moment. I was paying attention too, even if you didn't notice. He had the grace to look ashamed. By Sunday evening, they had all signed the lease. Emma was still sulking, but she had begun moving her things back to her original room. Mom had stopped crying and started cleaning, her way of coping with stress. Dad retreated to his study, presumably to figure out how he had missed so much about his supposedly predictable older daughter. I supervised as Emma's gym friends returned to move my bed back into my room. The sage green wall would need repainting, but that could wait. What mattered was that, for the first time, my family was dealing with real boundaries and consequences. By Monday morning, I had moved back in properly. As I unpacked my clothes and reorganized my space, I could hear Emma down the hall, complaining loudly on the phone to someone about her control-freak sister, who ruined everything. Mom knocked on my door around noon, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. Can we talk? I gestured for her to come in, noting how unsure she seemed in a room she had been ready to give away just days ago. I've been thinking, she said, sitting on my window seat. About everything. About how we've treated you compared to Emma. And I'm sorry, she said softly. We got so caught up in trying to help Emma achieve her dreams that we took you for granted. We assumed that because you were successful and responsible, you didn't need our support. I didn't need your support, I replied. But I deserved your respect. She nodded, tears forming. Yes, you did. You do. I never imagined you were capable of all this. That's the problem, Mom. None of you ever imagined I could be more than what you decided I was. She was quiet for a moment, looking around the room. 12 properties, you said. All here in the city. 13 now, I corrected. And yes, all local. Mostly small apartment buildings, a few family homes like this one. And you did it all yourself, while we thought you were just an accountant. I smiled slightly. The accounting job paid the bills while I built my portfolio. Every extra penny went into investments. While Emma was spending your money on business ventures that failed, I was quietly building something real. Mom wiped her eyes. We should have seen it. We should have encouraged you the way we did her. Maybe, I said. But I did it anyway. And now we all have to live with the choices we made. She stood up, smoothing her skirt nervously. Will you join us for dinner tonight? As a family? I considered it. Yes, I said finally. But remember, our relationship as family is separate from our relationship as landlord and tenants. Those boundaries need to stay clear. She nodded, understanding slowly dawning. You really have thought of everything, haven't you? I learned that from you too, I said. All those times you taught Emma about launching her businesses. I was watching, learning, even if you didn't realize it. As she left, I heard Emma's door slam down the hall. There would be more drama, more attempts at manipulation, more testing of boundaries. But for the first time, I felt secure in my position. I had protected myself and my interests while still leaving room for my family to grow and learn from their mistakes. It wasn't the happy ending they had imagined, with Emma running her wellness empire from my converted bedroom. But maybe it was the ending we all needed, one where truth, consequences, and real growth were possible. I sat at my desk, looking out at the familiar view from my window, and smiled. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply standing your ground and demanding the respect you deserve. A month into our new living arrangement, the initial shock had worn off, but the adjustments weren't always smooth. Emma's first attempt at paying rent was a wake-up call for everyone. "What do you mean my payment was rejected?" she demanded one morning, storming into the kitchen where I was having coffee. "I sent it through Venmo." I didn't look up from my laptop. The lease clearly states rent must be paid by check or bank transfer. No personal payment apps. It's a business transaction, not splitting brunch with friends. "That's ridiculous. Nobody uses checks anymore." "Professional landlords do," I replied calmly. "You have until the end of today to provide proper payment or late fees will apply." She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. An hour later, Dad came home from the bank with a cashier's check, clearly having bailed Emma out again. "Just this once," he said gruffly as he handed it over. "She needs to learn." I nodded, writing out a receipt. "Yes, she does. And so do you." He looked startled, then thoughtful. It was probably the first time anyone had directly addressed his role in enabling Emma's irresponsibility. The real breakthrough came 3 weeks into the new arrangement. I was reviewing property reports in my home office, formerly known as my room, when I heard raised voices from downstairs. "What do you mean you won't co-sign?" Emma's voice carried clearly. "I need this loan to restart my wellness coaching." "No, Emma." Dad's voice was firm in a way I'd rarely heard. "We nearly lost the house backing your previous ventures. We're lucky your sister was able to buy it, or we'd be homeless." "Lucky," Emma scoffed. "She's holding it over our heads. She's charging us below market rent and giving us a chance to fix our mistakes," Mom interjected, "which is more than most people would do." I smiled slightly, continuing my work. They were finally getting it. Later that evening, Emma knocked on my door, the first time she'd willingly sought me out since the change in ownership. "Can we talk?" she asked, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She sat, fidgeting with her phone case. "I've been thinking," she started, "about everything. About how I always jumped into businesses without really planning. And maybe I could use some advice about doing things the right way." I set aside my work, giving her my full attention. "What kind of advice? How did you do it?" "Build all this while none of us noticed. Every business I tried failed within months, but you." "I planned," I said simply. "I researched. I started small and reinvested everything. No shortcuts, no asking Mom and Dad to fund my dreams. Just hard work and strategy." She was quiet for a moment. Would you be willing to show me how to make a real business plan?" It was the first time Emma had ever acknowledged she might have something to learn from her boring older sister. "Yes," I said, "but my help comes with conditions." "Like what?" "You do the work. No shortcuts, no asking Mom and Dad for money. If you want to build something real, you do it the right way." She nodded slowly. "Like you did." Exactly like I did. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Mom and Dad already at the kitchen table, sharing worried looks. "Everything okay?" I asked, pouring my coffee. "We've been going over our finances," Dad said, really looking at them for the first time in, well, too long. "It's not good." I sat down with them. "Tell me." They laid out years of poor financial decisions, mostly revolving around funding Emma's failed ventures and living beyond their means. The foreclosure I'd prevented wasn't their only looming crisis. "We don't know how to fix this," Mom admitted, her voice small. I pulled out my laptop. "First, we make a plan. Then we follow it. No exceptions, no emotional decisions." Dad looked at me with new respect. "When did you get so wise?" "I always was," I replied. "You just weren't looking." Over the next few weeks, a new pattern emerged. Emma started joining me in my office each morning, learning about business planning and financial management. Mom and Dad attended every session, partly to support Emma, but mostly to learn themselves. "Your sister's teaching us more than we ever taught her," Mom commented one evening as we cleaned up after dinner. "Maybe because she learned it the hard way," I replied. "Sometimes those are the best lessons." The real test came when Emma presented her new business plan. Not for wellness coaching or social media influencing, but for a practical service helping small businesses organize their online presence. She'd identified a real need, researched the market, and created realistic projections. "I'd like to rent office space," she announced. "Not here. A real commercial space. Small to start, but room to grow." "And how do you plan to fund this?" Dad asked, clearly ready to reach for his checkbook. "With my own savings," Emma said firmly. "I've been working part-time at the coffee shop and living on a budget. It's not much, but it's a start, a real start." The pride in Dad's eyes was matched only by the surprise. This wasn't the Emma who demanded resources and attention. This was someone new, someone who finally learned to stand on her own. "I might know of a small commercial space," I offered. "One of my properties has a vacant office. The rent is reasonable and the location is good." Emma's eyes lit up, then turned suspicious. "You're not just offering because we're family, right?" I smiled. "No, I'm offering because you finally have a solid business plan and the right approach. You'll sign a proper lease and follow all the same rules as any other tenant." "I'd like that," she said, doing it the right way this time. As our parents watched this exchange, I saw something shift in their expressions. Pride, yes, but also understanding. They were seeing their daughters not as the roles they'd assigned us, reliable Sarah and creative Emma, but as the women we'd become. Later that night, I sat in my window seat, looking out at the familiar view that had almost been lost. The house that had nearly torn us apart was slowly bringing us back together, not as the dysfunctional family we'd been, but as something new, something stronger. My phone buzzed with a text from Charlotte. "How's the family situation?" "Better," I replied. "They're learning. We all are." Sometimes the biggest victories don't come from winning fights, but from changing the way people think. As I got ready for bed that night, I heard Emma in her room, not filming social media content, but working on her business plan. Change was possible. It just took someone brave enough to force it. 6 months after I bought our family home, I stood in the doorway of Emma's new office space, watching her arrange her desk with the same attention to detail she once gave to her Instagram aesthetic. The small commercial unit in one of my properties had transformed into a professional workspace, complete with a modest conference room and a simple sign. "Mitchell Digital Solutions." "What do you think?" she asked, adjusting her computer monitor. "Professional enough?" "Very," I replied, noting how her once elaborate wardrobe had been replaced by smart business casual attire. "Your first client meeting is tomorrow?" She nodded, a mix of excitement and nervousness on her face. 3 local businesses have already signed contracts. Small ones, but it's a start. A real start. "Like the ones I made," I said with a smile. "Yeah," she laughed. "No more expecting overnight success or asking mom and dad to fund everything. Though I still can't believe they're taking business classes at the community college." That had been an unexpected development. After facing their financial reality, our parents had decided to educate themselves. Dad's pride had finally given way to wisdom, and Mom had discovered a talent for bookkeeping. Speaking of the house, Emma said, straightening a framed photo of our family on her desk. "I have this month's rent ready. A check, not Venmo." "Good." Although, I paused. "I've been thinking about making some changes to the arrangement." Her face fell slightly. "You're not selling, are you?" "No," I assured her. "But I am considering offering Mom and Dad a rent-to-own agreement. They've proven they can be responsible, and it's still their home too." "What about me?" "You're welcome to stay as long as you need, but somehow, I think you'll be looking for your own place soon, especially if those client meetings go well." She smiled, and for the first time, I saw my sister as an equal, not someone to compete with or clean up after, but a person coming into her own strength. That evening, we had a family dinner, now a weekly tradition rather than a battlefield of tension. Mom had prepared everyone's favorites, and Dad was sharing stories from his business class. My professor used Sarah's property management strategy as a case study, he announced proudly. Didn't tell him it was my daughter, just presented it as an example of smart business growth. "And?" I asked, passing the salad. He said it was brilliant, called it a masterclass in strategic development. Dad's eyes misted slightly. "I should have seen it sooner, Sarah. What you were building." "We all should have," Mom added softly. "Maybe," I said, "but we're seeing it now. All of us." After dinner, I presented them with the rent-to-own proposal. Dad read through it carefully, no longer intimidated by legal documents or business terms. "This is very generous," he said finally. "It's fair," I corrected. "You've shown you can handle responsibility now. You've learned from past mistakes. That deserves recognition." Emma, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "I've been thinking, maybe I should look for my own place soon. Start building my own future like Sarah did." Mom reached for her hand. "Are you sure, honey? You know you're welcome here." "I know," Emma smiled. "But Sarah taught me something important. Success isn't about having everything handed to you. It's about building something real, something that's truly yours." I looked around the table at my family, not perfect, but growing, learning, evolving. The house that had almost torn us apart had become the foundation for something stronger. Later that night, as I sat in my room, no longer just a space to defend but a symbol of earned respect, I thought about how far we'd come. Emma was building a legitimate business. Our parents were taking control of their finances, and I was no longer the overlooked daughter, but a woman whose strength had helped her family find their own. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Thank you, not just for the office space, but for showing me a better way." I smiled, remembering the sister who once thought success meant social media followers and sage green walls. "You did the work," I texted back. "I just showed you the door." Sometimes the hardest lessons lead to the greatest growth. My family had learned it the hard way, but we learned it together. The house that built me had, in its own way, rebuilt us all. As I got ready for bed, I heard Emma practicing her client presentation next door, and Mom and Dad discussing their class assignments downstairs. I knew this was the happy ending none of us had expected, but exactly the one we needed. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth it. Just like family should be.